Hi, I'm Tom from the Simoniz Garage. Today we're going to show you how to perform a super interior clean. Now, super interior clean is a meticulous cleaning of all of the interior hard surfaces. Okay, that includes the vinyl, the hard plastic, even the glass, the headliner, things like that. Now, this is not, when the process is sold by itself, does not include actually shampooing the upholstery or the carpets. Now, there's some things to keep in mind before we even start. Some rules. Number one, in the vacuuming process and even in the cleaning process, we never reach our hand under a seat without looking. Okay? Number two, I recommend wearing gloves. If the car is really loaded with debris, eyewear to make sure that nothing's really blowing and potentially getting in your eye. Number three, when we dress, you want to really be sure never to dress side steps, dress the pedals or the steering wheel. All right? So, if the customer comes in, first thing we do is take out any belongings. Okay? So, Will and Nico here are going to actually help me out and perform the services while I explain to you. One thing to keep in mind is in a belongings bag or a Ziploc bag or just even a paper cup, change. We're going to be cleaning the ashtray or the cup holders and even, in most cars you're going to find just loose change. We want to make sure we can give those back to the customer. Now, in an express, you're actually, most likely you have a customer waiting there. That's good because if you find, let's say, money or earrings, things like that, you can alert the customer immediately, because the one thing you never want to do is vacuum any of those things or potentially misplace them. That's why belongings bags, things like that, are very important to have everything in. So, now, much like the rest of the Simoniz processes, you're going to start front driver's side of the car. We're always going to do 60%. Now, if you have the luxury of having two people working on a car, one person will start in the rear passenger side, the other person will start in the front driver's side. Now, because of this, they're able to overlap and do basically 60% or reach as far as they can to vacuum, to blow out, so on and so forth, without bumping into each other. Now, the first process, and really in all interior processes, is going to be to vacuum the car. Okay? So, Nico's going to start in the rear passenger side. Will here is going to start in the front driver's side. Now, it's important to expose the most amount of carpeted areas as you work. So, the front driver's side, Will here is going to vacuum. He's going to remove the mat. He's going to pull that seat as far back as possible so that he can expose the most amount of carpeted area. Okay? Then, when he's done, he's actually going to push it forward and expose the most amount of carpeted area back here. As you can see, Nico, on the other side, has actually, because this is a minivan, is flipping up, has the ability to flip up the seats to expose the most amount of carpeted area on the rear passenger side. Now, when working in tandem, the person that finishes first would usually go to the rear cargo area if it's an SUV or a minivan or something like that. Now, if it's a sedan, it's really going to be up to each of you to decide whether or not trunks are going to be included. For the most part, we would say to do so if they were in fact empty and the customer alerted you to do so. So the next step is going to be with compressed air. What's going to happen is they're going to take about 80 to 90 pounds of pressure here and blow out any of the things that have collected in some of those areas you couldn't reach with the vacuum. So if something, let's say, is underneath the seat here, Will is going to start in the front driver's side. He's going to push everything back to the floor of the rear driver's side. So he's able to basically move all the things that they couldn't reach with the vacuum. And then if he does, in fact, expose a lot of debris, he can then re-vac after that as a third step. Now, the thing to remember about these are you have a lot of pressure, okay? So with things like vents and electronics, you really want to keep it back, or even potentially use your hand at a distance to deflect the air. You know, one thing you don't want to do is get right up on like a vent, because some of the older ones especially can get brittle and actually just break right there. Okay? So they're going to quickly run through the same process: front driver side, rear passenger side, all the nooks and crannies, basically blowing debris to get it to an area where it can be re-vacuumed up. Now, for the most part, you're going to try to avoid pushing things back and forth in the car. Sometimes it's just unavoidable. You know, when a car has a lot of debris, especially in between the seats, sometimes it's unavoidable. You're going to have to revac both the front and the back. But if possible, try to just blow into one area. Therefore, let's say, you know, if you had a good amount of debris underneath the seat and you can blow that all into the rear passenger side, leave a pile. That way you can just revac one pile and you're done. Okay, but for right now we have a little bit extra there. So I'm going to have Will just finish that up. Now, the next step is going to be pre-treating some of the problem areas and ultimately cleaning all of the hard surfaces such as the vinyl and plastic. Now, when we say pre-treat, what that means is we're going to choose a product. We want it to be properly diluted, number one. Then, also, we want to make sure we take care of really the problem areas like cup holders, things like that, before we worry about the larger surfaces. So, what Will's going to do, and Nico as well, are going to use detail brushes, as well as a product. Now, there's a couple different products you can use. Really, there's a few different products you can use. These are two different types of products. All right, this is a multi-surface cleaner, safe on glass. This is really going to be a glass cleaner as well. And then there's an all-purpose cleaner degreaser. Now, for the most part, you're going to use an all-purpose cleaner degreaser because the cleaner degreaser is going to remove things like the oils from you know, your body oils that'll get on, you know, armrests and things like that. Whereas a glass and multi-surface wouldn't. But the thing to remember is that this is a solvent cleaner. So you have to avoid things like clear plastic, which gauge clusters are. So what we want to do is avoid spraying any of the cleaner degreaser or any solvent-based cleaner onto a surface that potentially could get onto a gauge cluster or even into an electronic. So we try to spray outside of the car as much as possible. Now, he's going to use detail brushes, all right, to start off with getting into some of these, the cracks and crevices, the vents, so on and so forth. Also, he's going to use different detail brushes to get into, you know, areas such as the speakers, some of the holes if they get caked up, as I'm sure you've all seen somebody get out of a car and they use their foot, it gets caked with mud, things like that. You can actually use detail brushes to break those up, okay? Just spray a little bit of cleaner there onto the product, and you can actually just kind of smash it in there, and it'll actually loosen that up. Now, you just want to avoid using too much to harm the speaker. Now, for the most part, unless there's a stain that you have to focus on, like on an armrest, for instance, which you can use the toothbrush to actually do a little extra scrubbing, or a dual-purpose toothbrush, which has a stiffer bristle and a softer bristle. Those can also be used for those purposes. This is a parts brush, really good for getting in between seats, places like that. It's a stiff bristle. You know, really going to be a big fan of that, I'm sure. And more importantly, the one that you're going to use probably the most is a vent and dash brush. This is what's going to get into all the cracks and crevices, especially the vents, to clean them and remove any debris that might be on there. Now, once you're starting on, Will's going to start on the front driver's side. He's not going to go and pre-treat here and then go into the back and pre-treat and then come back to do, all these large surfaces. He's actually going to pre-treat, take care of the cup holders, so on and so forth. In some cases, if the cup holders can be removed, it's actually nice to be able to clean them in a shop sink or even in a bucket of soapy water. If they can't be removed, just spraying a little product in there, let it sit for a short period of time, agitate, and then wipe. So what he's going to do is he's going to take the detail brushes, do this area, then he's going to take a terry towel, spray the terry towel outside of the vehicle. Then he's going to wipe and clean the rest of the areas, the larger areas, larger surfaces. Now, why does he spray the towel outside of the car rather than just spraying the body panels? Well, if you spray a solvent and it's real hot out, you spray a solvent, it just drips, you actually have the ability of that solvent, that cleaner, drying on you, and it can actually fade. It can discolor some of the plastic. And you can avoid that just simply by spraying a towel outside of the vehicle rather than spraying the surfaces. So, and that also keeps overspray and things like that from hitting the gauge cluster. So, that being said, these guys are going to get started. What we try to avoid at all costs are putting any detail brushes in our back pocket. Okay? If you're going to forget, you can sit down, you can end up putting a hole in a seat causing damage. So we keep the brushes separate. You can either have them in a pocket such as this. If you wear shop shirts, this is great because you can actually get in, work around the car, so on and so forth without belt buckles or anything hitting. But if not, you want to use something like a detail apron where you can keep everything just handy right there. I can't stress enough, it is really important to dilute the products correctly. If you use something too strong, you can discolor. There's a reason we formulate things the way we do. Now let's go see how Nico's making out on the passenger side. So now we're on the passenger side. So here's Nico. He's actually working with a couple different tools. He's using an actual white, the scuff pad that we talked about on the other side. And he's actually using Citrus Clean, which is also a solvent-based cleaner. It foams up, works really well at removing a lot of the same stains as the all-purpose concentrate. One thing to keep in mind, we're working with a minivan here. All right, we have to get all these different surfaces done and all of them cleaned. Minivans have a lot of cup holders and quite a bit of surface area as far as these hard surfaces are concerned. But the hardest thing about a minivan is the doors. The doors are sliding. You actually can't reach them normally. So what Nico's going to do is actually flip up the seat. This car actually folds into the floor, which is perfect. And what he's going to do is fold that in, and then he's going to take a paper floor mat, okay? He's going to put that in. He's going to stand on that, close the door, and work on the door from inside the vehicle. Now, as he's working inside the vehicle and getting the door and continuing to work on these hard surfaces, I'll take this opportunity to talk a little bit about headliners, okay? Now, once they go and they take care of these hard surfaces, the headliners need to be touched up as well. Now, a couple things to really keep in mind. Headliners you never want to get saturated. You never really want to get them soaking wet. Number one, water spots can form, as it's basically, headliners are a piece of fabric glued to a piece of foam, which is glued to ultimately a board. Then what happens is if you use too much water, the weight itself can either pull those down and actually separate the fabric from the foam or the board. Also, that foam can actually get saturated with product, and the gravity will actually continue to wick and cause water stains. Now, Another thing to keep in mind is we never really want to use solvents as they can remove adhesive. So if we were to spray a solvent up on the product, on the headliner, you'll actually potentially remove some of that adhesive or weaken the adhesive, and it would fall. So keeping all these in mind, how do we clean them? Well, we spot clean them. Now, these are really perfect for headliners, okay? What they are carpet wipes. All right, so they clean, they get stains out such as ink and wine and things like that, but mainly for carpets. But they're perfect for headliners because they're not saturated, all right? They're just lightly moist. So you can actually take these, and once Nico's done, I'm going to have him open up the door to demonstrate. You can actually take these and spot clean any areas onto the headliner, and it'll just get it lightly damp. You remove the stains, and you just let it dry. It's all set. Nico, you mind just touching up a little headliner spot here? So you got a little spot over there, looks like. Yeah. Yep. There you go. Now, thanks. So now, unless the headliner is really bad, you may have to go through one or two of them. But you can actually save this and wait until, as he moves forward now, the places that it's definitely going to be useful are places like the visors, all right, where you get a lot of fingerprints and things like that. But keep in mind, we now have an answer for headliners that's really effective. All right, so now we're back on this side, and Will's about to start dressing. So what he's going to do is start pre-dressing. All those areas that are really hard to reach, such as the window pulls and the vents and things like that. So you're going to notice as he starts, he's going to use his hand to kind of shield the product from getting anywhere he doesn't want. And just very light little sprays as he goes to actually dress the car with the vinyl dressing. He's going to blend everything together. It's going to all look evenly applied. All right. Now, one thing I like to use, this is just a ready-to-use vinyl leather dressing. We do have, a couple different kinds. We have a concentrate, so on and so forth, number 2. But I like to squirt it on. You can spray it onto the applicator if you so choose. Once again, spray outside of the vehicle. Now, I also like using a square wax applicator. The reason I do is I can actually mold my hand around it, and I can therefore use it as a buffer from things such as the glass, okay? As you can see if you can see, Nico's working on the passenger side, dressing in there. He's back inside the vehicle on the paper mat, making sure that he's not getting the carpet dirty. Now, don't forget, when you're dressing and when you're cleaning, the areas around the seats, any hard plastic and vinyl areas. So, it's very common for me when I see detailers working that they don't look up. And, there's, the sunglass holders, things like that, that are mounted on the ceiling of the car. You want to make sure those get cleaned and dressed as well. Now, one thing that you're going to see is if you just apply it, what happens is it's going to leave that kind of greasy residue. So what Will's doing is taking either a secondary towel, or if you haven't used too much, you can use the other side of the wax applicator to buff it down. Now, what this does is it makes it a nice, even kind of shine, a sheen, so to speak. But what it's not doing is leaving a greasy residue. This is really important also on the dashboard, okay? Because on sunny days, that reflection is actually going to be a driving hazard, a safety hazard. Now, as they finish up dressing, I'll tell you a little bit about the next steps. At this point, everything has been vacuumed, blown out, re-vacked, because we found a lot of debris. They cleaned all the hard surfaces and then dressed them. Now, once the dressing has been applied, been buffed down, now it's time to take care of all the glass. Now, the glass is not just the windows. It's also the mirrors, the vanities, all right? So everything inside, any piece of glass or mirror inside the actual car. Now, at this point, if you have, let's say, your car keys, which really I would recommend keeping on your detail cart or on a key rack, something like that, somewhere you can get to them. Doing the glass, this is a good time to put the key in the ignition, turn the car on, and if you have an automatic shifter, you put it to drive. Make sure that you clean that area. The last thing you want is for a customer to get in and they paid for a super interior clean, and then they go to drive away, put their car into drive, and it's all dirty and caked with debris, etc. So we want to make sure that when you actually get to the glass part, that's when you would clean that. Now, it's also important, and if we'll just stand up real fast. So right here, you know, on this car it doesn't have it, but usually you have the controls for the seat. Now, it's important, you're moving the seat back and forth. It's important to make sure that when you do clean and dress, or you make sure you get that area. You lift up those handles because the customer, when they go to get in the car for the first time, they have to maneuver their seat to get it back to where they need it. If you left that area dirty or undressed, you automatically failed to meet expectations. So now we're back and we're starting to work on the glass and the mirrors. So as you can see, Will is actually going to turn the car on. He's working on the shifter. So he's going to clean up and make sure he gets all the debris out of there. Then while the key is on, he's actually going to put down the windows. All right? So he wants to, what we want to do is we want to make sure we get that rim. Okay? So he's going to take care of the gauge cluster, the vanity mirrors, the rear view mirror, any glass, whether if it's a navigation screen, if it's just the screen for the radio. At this point, we want to make sure we get all of those surfaces. So when he comes back, he's going to hit this up. Windows will go back up, and then you can do the same glass cleaning method that we've shown in some of these other videos, which is the box method, where you just jam the towel up in each corner and then fill it in. So you notice he sprayed the product, moved it around, made sure the whole product had it, or the whole window, was hit. Then flip the towel to a dry side, buff that product in to clarity. Now he's just moving around the car. He's doing 60% of the windshield, and he's going to work his way around the vehicle as Nico works his way up towards the front to finish up the windshield. And that's it. That's a super interior clean.